Iraqi. Many Iraqi friends continue to suffer as refugees inside and outside of Iraq. As a matter of fact, an Iraqi friend whom I consider a brother named Ali is meeting with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees office in Jordan today to process his application for asylum under the United States Refugees Admissions Program. Recently, Ali contacted me through my website asking for help. As a result, a few of my comrades in the U.S. Army sent him letters of support since he frequently risked his life to help us in 2003 and 2004. I pray that Ali and many others are quickly helped. I wish to focus this letter, Ted, on things we both struggled with enormously: negligence, dereliction of duty, and corruption. You believe Generals Joseph Phil and David Petraeus were negligent and committed dereliction of duty. So do I. In the note you addressed to Generals Petraeus and Phil found by your body that the Army says is your, quote, suicide note, you stated, quote, you are not interested in your careers and provide no support to your staff, no mission support, and you don't care. I cannot support a mission that leads to corruption, human rights abuses, and liars. I am sullied no more. I didn't volunteer to support corrupt, money-grubbing contractors, nor work for commanders only interested in themselves. The members of your family believe this note is a part of a journal entry that was removed and placed near your body. Moreover, they told me that they have not received your journal, among other personal effects. While at the port of entry at Al-Walid in 2003, among the many memoranda I submitted to my superiors was a report expressing the need for an automated tracking system for immigration and emigration. General Ricardo Sanchez and Paul Bremer sent a delegation to Al-Walid to assess the port of entry for installation of the Personnel Identification, Secure Comparison, and Evaluation System known as the PISES to provide tracking of transnational movement of immigration and emigration. When the team departed, they informed me that the facilities would support installation of the PISES. By the time my unit, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, left, in March 2004, PISES had not been in place. In 2005, I returned to Iraq for a second tour, assigned as the Regimental Iraqi Security Forces Coordinator, working for Colonel H.R. McMaster, who has today been slotted for General. Among my duties was to oversee the development and security of the northern half of the Syrian-Iraqi border at the port of entry at Rabia. On June 2005, Commander Guy Velarde, working for Multinational Corps Iraq, informed me that CPAT, a sub-entity, had possessed a dozen PISES in containers located in Baghdad. He also informed me that they would install the systems in the near future. Upon return to Western Nineveh province, I informed my superiors, including Colonel McMaster. In August 2005, General Joseph Phil, commander of CPAT, visited Rabia and briefed us so that we could brief him on the status of the Syrian-Iraqi border. We briefed General Phil, who scoffed at the notion of the installation of the PISES system and stated that the system was no good and we don't have them anyhow. I informed General Phil of my conversation with Commander Velarde, to which General Phil replied, "That's not true, and the PISES is no good anyhow." In January of 2006, shortly before departure from my second tour, Colonel Carl Lammers of the United States Marine Corps Reserve sent me an email on a secure network indicating that, in fact, the PISES systems were in containers in Baghdad. I was outraged. As of March 2006, when the 3rd ACR departed Western Nineveh province, no PISES or equivalent tracking system had been installed in the Rabia POE. From 2003 to 2007, no computer systems for tracking immigration or emigration were installed along the Syrian-Iraqi border. This surely contributed to the instability of Iraq. Foreign fighters and criminals were free to move transnationally with little fear of apprehension. It is probable that significant numbers of Americans and Iraqis were wounded and killed as a result of this. I see that I have 1 minute left, so I'll skip down to one more important point. I witnessed contractual corruption on the point of Lee Dynamics International. I have written testimony, notes from then Brigadier General Bergner on page 4, elucidating the fact that General Petraeus and General Phil had no systems of accountability for thousands of weapons and no standard operating procedures for the procurement, stowage, and dissemination of that equipment. And lastly, I would end that, for the past year and a half, myself and a number of fellow veterans of Iraq have co-authored pieces in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, among a number of other media outlets. And we have beaten our drum to try to raise the issue of the dereliction of duty committed by a number of generals who have been promoted and promoted again and continue to perpetuate the lies and paint a rosy picture of the situation of Iraq.
My name is Vincent J.R. Emanuele. I am a resident of Indiana, and I served with the United States Marine Corps from September 2002 through January of 2006 with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, Alpha Company, 3rd Platoon as a rifleman and a squad automatic machine gunner. I was deployed to Iraq in August of 2004, where I spent my time in Iraq as a rifleman in 3rd Squad, 1st Team, 3rd Platoon. Our area of operation was a small border town a mile south of the Euphrates and 15 miles east of Syria called Al-Qaim, Iraq. The issues I will be discussing today include rules of engagement or the breakdown thereof, the death of innocents, the destruction of civilian property, the abuse of prisoners, and the mishandling of the dead, all of which took place during the duration of our tour in Iraq. These stories are not mine alone. These are our stories, the stories of 3rd Platoon. I had the chance to speak with several members from my platoon, and these are the events they and I felt were pertinent to discuss with you today. An act that took place quite often in Iraq was that of taking pop shots at cars that drove by. This was quite easy for most Marines to get away with because our rules of engagement stated that the town of Al-Qaim had already been forewarned and knew to pull their cars to a complete stop when approaching a United States convoy. Our rules of engagement stated that we should first fire warning shots into the ground in front of the car, then the engine block, and then the driver and passengers. Most of the time, however, the shots made their way straight to those very individuals in the car. That is if the car was even moving in the first place. Many times, cars that had actually pulled off to the side of the road were also shot at. Of course, the consequences of such actions posed a huge problem for those of us who patrolled the streets every day. This was not the best way to become friendlier with an already very hostile local population. This was not an isolated incident and took place for most of my 8-month deployment. In one particular instance, we were sent on a mission to blow up a bridge that was being used to transport weapons across the Euphrates. During this mission, we were ambushed and were forced to return fire in order to make our way out of the city. There are several problems with instances such as these. First, it was very difficult, if not impossible, to clearly identify hostile targets. This resulted in our unit firing into the town with little or no identification of these hostile targets. Because of inadequate intelligence and lack of personnel or competent leadership, our platoon lost a good Marine that day, and I lost my best friend. The retrans site, otherwise known as a retransmission site, was a communications post set up on a plateau overlooking the town of Al-Qaim. This communication site was there to provide communications between the main base at the railroad station where we were stationed and an outpost in Husayba, Iraq, where Bravo Company's area of operations took place. We would encounter mortar fire on a daily basis. Most of the time, we would return this fire with mortar fire of our own. Some of the time, counter battery would call in a specific location for us to exchange fire. On occasion, when the counter battery could not call in a specific location, our unit would fire upon the town anyway. Sometimes in the hills off to the west of the town where we thought the mortar fire was coming from, and other times straight into the town of Al-Qaim itself, onto buildings, houses, and businesses. Because of the lack of personnel at the retrans site, very rarely, if ever, did we conduct a battle damage assessment report to report civilian deaths and destruction. So almost all of the time, these incidents went unreported and not investigated. This was not an isolated incident as well. Another mission our platoon was tasked to take on was that of transporting prisoners from our detention facility on base back to the desert. The reason I say the desert and not their town is because that is exactly where we would drop them off, in the middle of nowhere. Now, most of these men had obviously been deemed innocent, or else they would have been moved to a more permanent detention facility and not released back into the local population. Our unit engaged in punching, kicking, butt stroking, or generally harassing and abusing these very prisoners until the point at which our unit would take them in the middle of the desert, miles from their respective homes, and at times throw them out of the back of our Humvees, all the while continually punching, kicking, and at times even throwing softball-sized rocks at their backs as they ran away. This, once again, was not an isolated incident. Possibly the most disturbing of what took place in Iraq was the mishandling of the dead. On several occasions, our convoy came across bodies that had been decapitated and were lying on the road, sometimes for weeks. When encountering these bodies, standard procedure was to run over the corpses, sometimes even stopping and taking pictures, which was also standard practice when encountering the dead in Iraq. This, along with neglecting to account for many of those who were killed or wounded. On one specific occasion, after I had personally